So we're here to talk about Treasure Gender, the initiative behind it, the prerequisites, I guess, maybe the politics, and the fun.
You don't only have to have activism in protests. You can also create a different kind of activism. You can create utopia spaces of utopia. So in this case, it would be a safe space for anyone, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender expression, to simply experiment and see what happens. And I think for me, the question would be, how can queer practices, not queer identities, but queer practices, can lead to embracing some sort of a separate identity. I remember somebody told me that Treasure Gender is revolutionary, and I was like, no, it's not. It's preparing for one.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, George Rallis. And I'm here to welcome you to the podcast about Treasure Gender of IgnitedPower. And we have with us the creator, founder. What label do you want to use for your relation to this?
I'm not really sure.
Daddy.
Sure.
Okay, great. The daddy.
Zaddy.
The zaddy of Treasure Gender, Pedro. Hey, babes.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah?
How are you?
I'm good. Great on this warm winter day in Cyprus. So we're here to talk about Treasure Gender, the initiative behind it, the prerequisites, I guess, maybe the politics and the fun that event was to a lot of people and still is, actually. So let's start a little bit with maybe introducing yourself and what you're doing in relation to that and what it is.
Okay, so Treasure Gender is kind of a child of two things.
Okay.
It's a child of the Occupy Buffer Zone movement, which ended in 2012, where Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots kind of came together into the buffer zone and took over. And from there, you had the new relationships developing between the communities of the island. And so it was also kind of an intervention of the social reproduction in a way. So that's one thing to have in mind. And then the other part is coming from Barcelona. I was at a party there, a house party, where people were changing clothes in a room and then entering the living room and then partying and then going back into the bedroom and then changing clothes again, blah, 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 which gave the idea of let's turn this into an event when I come back to Cyprus. So, about me, I came from New York, where I studied anthropology. And before that, it was psychology and philosophy. So it was also kind of bringing this academic background and kind of bringing all these elements together to create Treasure Gender.
Amazing. And the first one, because you mentioned a house party, if I'm not mistaken, was on your birthday.
My birthday?
No?
Oh, the first Treasure Gender?
Yes.
No, the first Treasure Gender was an after party of an event called Straightness Must Be Destroyed, where Safo Papandonopoulou, a trans woman academic, came to Cyprus to talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. At your place.
Yeah, it was at my place.
Okay, right. That's what I remembered, but I wasn't sure if it was your birthday or something. Okay, so what does it entail then as an event? Treasure Gender.
What does it entail? It entails 3 DJs, clothes for people to change, and also some makeup. These are the basics of Treasure Gender. And sometimes we invite performers or people who've never performed before.
Yes. I know. Well, that was actually my first ever performance at Treasure Gender. That was 10 years ago maybe.
Was
by
it?
now. Yeah, I was
2015.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Okay, great. So, as I remember, it is described as a social gender laboratory.
Yeah, political laboratory to experiment with gender expression.
There we go. Do you want to unpack that a little bit?
Okay, let's start with the laboratory.
Yeah.
A laboratory, let's say it's a space where you can experiment, and if you experiment, that means that you are taking what you know and you're trying to figure out ways that you're not sure of to play with, and so that's where you kind of intervene in the social reproduction in a way, just by experimenting creatively, which you can do with gender expression. So if we go into the politics, it depends on what we mean by politics, because if we could think of, okay, so if we have activism in protests, you don't only have to have activism in protests. You can also create a different kind of activism. You can create utopia spaces of utopia, where you can create these worlds where the ideal world in practice. So in a way, the politics come as a reaction from the outside world into the world that you're creating. And you practice the world that you would want to create. So in this case, it would be a safe space for anyone, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender expression, to simply experiment and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot to pick from and pick apart to begin with. But I want to start a little bit with this idea of play, which I think, in my own understanding at least, or in the way that I experience and hold queerness, is like an inexplicable and like undetachable part of what it means to be queer. And by play, I don't mean only in the sexual way, but I also mean in this social way that you just described, because I feel a lot of times when people talk about politics, we tend to restrain ourselves on this idea of governmental politics, policies, and this kind of like discourse, let's say, and we forget that politics are lived in everyday life and are experienced in our bodies, on our bodies, and with each other. So it's really important to actually not necessarily hold the fact that everything is political, but actually understand that it is, because it just is, you know what I mean? So then once you start playing with those ideas, there's just much more freedom in understanding not only politics as in a way to act, but politics as in community building, because that's what I take out of Treasure Gender, that's what it is. I mean, I started performing there because we were hanging out, or we were like in similar groups anyway of people, and then I just shared that I started doing belly dance. Rak Sharki represent the OG Egyptian, you know what I mean? Just to call it as it is. And then you were like, why don't you just perform? And it was this like more loose invitation of just come and do your thing. Not as in to negate the seriousness or the importance of that space, but kind of like the unpretentiousness of art making, community, and lack of hierarchy, actually. Because even when I look at the DJs and the performers that I am aware of, at least, everyone takes themselves with this idea of I take what I do seriously, but I don't take myself seriously, if that makes sense. So then it opens up queerness in this way that is, I don't want to say radical, because I think that word is just oversaturated, but it's sincere and unpretentious. Let's just say that, you know? So I want to ask a little bit more about the DJ choices or the performers, or if there's like a mission there, or if there's some sort of like understanding of what kind of people you wish to attract or exhibit. I'm holding myself out of it also, right? I'm not saying this to, yeah.
I mean, in terms of sincerity, but also having the element of play. In order to play, you need to have some rules.
Yeah.
If you play hide and seek, you need to have some rules of how to play the game, right? So if Treasure Gender is a game, let's say, or a space where you can play, you need to have some rules, which is the rules of safe space. As soon as you enter the space, you kind of enter into a social contract that you will, excuse my French, you're not going to be a dickhead. I don't know if that's okay.
It is now, you know what I mean?
To other people, ideally. And at the same, but the reason why this is, that's there as kind of a policy in a way. It's in order to preserve that somebody who performs, somebody who enters the space to have fun, somebody who experiments with their gender expression is entering a vulnerable state. And if they're entering a vulnerable state, that means that you're also exposing like the inner child in a way, which is also the part that allows us to play. So you have to protect that.
Yeah.
And so if everybody is kind of involved in that and play, then you start letting loose of your defenses. Okay, you lose your defenses in all parties. Let's say, depending on your alcohol.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want to encourage people to bring out this part of themselves out by lowering those defenses. So if you do that in a communal setting where even the structure of the space is something that we think about, on how bodies can be more intimate with one another, then yeah, ideally you would be generating something that's communal, but there's a form there that you might have difficulty describing because it's a very fresh kind of thing.
Absolutely. This idea of safety around queerness is like very important, not only in like queer discourse, but I also think in like rainbow capitalism, you know, just to give the flip side of things right now. I know you told me not to mention neoliberalism, but I kind of have to, because that's like, I think the only ethical way to go about this, if that makes sense. Because, you know, queerness has been inducted within the workforce and within capitalism full force by American and Western like discourse, like after Stonewall for years now. So, you know, there's this like big Instagrammable, like Berlin adjacent kind of like aesthetic of what queerness is and how people live their lives a lot of the times in white countries, right? Around safe spaces, which to me, I also find a lot of the times performative because it holds within it a different kind of hierarchy, maybe a hierarchy of queerness, a hierarchy of coolness, of capital, you know what I mean? Because I don't think people hate queer people. I think people hate poor queer people. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of really rich gay people. I don't want to call them queer because they don't get that. In really high places, they might be in the closet or not. But what I'm trying to say is that I think what sets transgender aside, at least in my own experience, from other initiatives, not only on the local level, I mean, because I've experienced a lot of queer spaces internationally as well, like, is this like of hierarchy? Because there is a committee or like a council behind it, you know what I mean? And there are people that like work on it, but it doesn't feel like I'm entering your space or your clique.
I see.
You get what I mean? That's what I'm trying to get to. And I think that's like really healthy. And that's the only way to actually allow people to be vulnerable. You know, because vulnerability is the number one state in safe spaces. But that seems to be forgotten a lot of the times, you know?
Just a disclosure, I mean, I called it the council because I was a narrative designer in video games. I just want to make it sound cool. But yeah, I mean, in terms of organizing the event as the council, we have discussions that go through each level of, you know, what kind of issues there might be. So, for example, when we did Splash Your Gender, which was a beach party, we even discussed, you know, what if somebody just wants to come and be naked? How do we deal with this? And I don't remember what we decided. I personally I was thinking, this is never gonna happen, whatever. And then and it did happen. Somebody was asked, like, can I be naked? And what's your policy? And I was like, oh shit. Like, it's a good thing that we've been able to talk about it. So in terms of organization, we work in the background. And I think that's it's important for that to be happening in the background, because at the end of the day, the people who come to Trash Your Gender are the people who are making Trash Your Gender. We're just setting up the structure, and then people's agency kind of enact that. I mean,
I don't want to bring theory into this, but this reminds me a lot of like actor network theory. If I'm gonna bring it together with something, at least in my own philosophical understanding, it would be very that, because you're all like quite strong agents in why people come there. Not that they come for you, but the fact that you are the people that you are and you hold the space in the way that you hold it invites certain kinds of people that make the space safe. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of like what community is. It's just a lot of people coming together and holding one another in that stance. So who are the rest of the council?
The rest of the council?
Yes.
It's Anastasia Dimitriou, Ayjan Garib, and Alexandros Evstathiou.
Do you all have like certain responsibilities, or is it like a horizontal kind of thing?
I'm not really sure because we do have responsibilities. So, for example, somebody's going to take care of the performers, somebody's going to take care of the DJs, which would be me. Kind of delegates that are babysitting,
Right.
Who's coming. But in terms of the organization of the whole event, it's all of us that decide. Okay, you know, sometimes I'll be kind of the guide to things. But yeah.
What urged you to bring this in Cyprus?
I was bored. I think it was a year after the Accept's first Pride. I was bored with my options. I wanted to do something without justifying myself to anybody. And so I just followed my own path in a way until it grew so much when I was like, oh shit, I can't handle this. The people need to join. Yeah.
Well, it was a breath of fresh air, at least the ones I've been to. I haven't been to in a minute because I haven't been in Cyprus. But I'm excited for what's to come. Are there any future ones planned?
There is one coming up in February.
Great.
I won't disclose where yet.
No.
We don't know when yet either. But watch out for social media. We do have a Treasure Gender Instagram page, which needs a lot of work. And because before COVID, Treasure Gender was using word of mouth and Facebook.
Right.
And now with the era of kind of Instagram, it's a whole different work. It takes labor.
Oh, there was a Facebook group. You're right. I do remember that now. Whoa. Okay, cool. Yeah. So how can people find this Instagram?
Just find Treasure Gender.
So it's trash. What's the...
There is no logo yet. We're still waiting for the logo.
Okay.
We still need to put some photos up.
Work in progress. Love it. You know what I mean? But what's your handle?
It's Treasure Gender.
Treasure Gender. Okay, great. What do you wish to add in the local landscape?
What I wish to add in the local landscape. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
You're obviously doing things for a reason, right? Not that there is one reason, but you exist within a discourse of things, within like a local queer scene, within a local anti-colonial scene. You said before about kind of like the two zone between Turkish Cypriots and like Greek Cypriots. So that's what I'm saying. Like with all of that in mind of what Cyprus encompasses as an entity, what do you wish to add? Or maybe what would you wish to see more?
I want to, I think that it's more of a question, and, questions can be your compass. Mm-hmm. So it gives you direction. Mm-hmm. You don't exactly know where, but somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, the question would be, how can queer practices, not queer identities, but queer practices can lead to embracing some sort of a Cypriot identity? And I think we can do that through queer practices. And I think that's a challenge. And I think it's a challenge that would be healthy for a lot of people. And I remember somebody asked me, they told me that Treasure Gender is revolutionary. And I was like, no, it's not. It's preparing for one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This idea of having like new kind of like Cypriot identity or cultural Cypriot identity, at least, I think is a very important topic that is rarely touched upon. especially in colonial contexts, actually, because, colonialism never really left Cyprus. It's either branded as like expat culture with digital nomads, or with like military bases that have never really left Cyprus to commit other crimes of genocide, of other kind of colonialism. So I want to take it a little bit just to put the importance in proper names. This is what Butler is also kind of like referencing a lot with this idea of gender performativity. When you have a lot of these like weird intellectual fallacies of how gender is performative, but then when it comes to sex, no, that's just a natural way of existing. But then Butler wrote so many other books explaining that the reason we consider sex to be gendered is because gender is performative. So then this idea of having a proper name or a proper subjectivity around identity is de facto like a fallacy. And it just doesn't really exist because all of this comes from socialization, from different understandings of information passed down to you from previous generations, or from a lack of information actually from previous generations. So I think archiving queerness in Cyprus, or archiving this intersection of, I don't know, Cypriot 2.0, whether that is queer or against identity politics or against whatever you want to call it, is really important. So I think Trash Your Gender falls somewhere within that kind of queer practice, And I know that you were part of an exhibition around archiving of some sorts. Is that correct?
Yes, it was last year. Queer Wave was organizing it with some other stakeholders at NIMAC on the queer history of Cyprus, and Transgender was part of it, where Logan Bellew, who is an HIV activist and a photographer, I've named him as the transgender archivist kind of thing.
Love it.
He brought out the photos that he took during Transgender. It was exhibited, so it was kind of oh my God, we made history and we didn't intend to, but but it was nice to see that he was gaining a place in Cypriot history. We'll see what we do with the archive. I think it's another thing that's going to take time and process to how we can exhibit, and that also affected on how we're going to be organized in the future too. So
Absolutely. I mean, this idea of having queer lives archived, or having their life be archived, is really important within queer discourse, because we like our history kind of thing.
Yes.
Even if the AIDS epidemic wasn't as, I don't want to say impactful, because it was very impactful, but it wasn't as featured in the public imagination and knowledge in Cyprus. It still exists. And even the fact that we are like a colony of the West, we have lost a tremendous amount of information from the generation that no longer lives to tell us our history. You know what I mean? And also, I don't know, a lot of queer people, they're like, my existence is activism and is a political act. And it is. Actually, a very good book is by Dominic Johnson, who has this book called The Art of Living that documents a lot of underground queer performers, mostly and visual artists, but revolving around nightlife and gallery spaces. Basically what this whole thing that you just described is, but in the Anglo-Saxon culture. So I think Trash Your Gender does something very similar, to be honest. So having an archive of that is super important.
Nice.
Great. Well, that was really insightful. So thank you so much. So again, I'm George Rallis. You can follow me on Instagram at gravitygrave, gravity_grave. And do you want to share your personal ones, or maybe not?
Sure. Mine is Kubeps.
Kubeps.
Yeah.
There we go.
KOUPEPS. Yes.
And Trash Your Gender, no gaps, no dots, no nothing. Just
nothing.
At Trash Your Gender.
Simple as it is.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and see you at the next one.